Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's now gone 10:30. Thanks for coming along to today's Education Committee meeting. Of course, we've got one new face this morning. We've got Mrs Maureen Harkins here, who there's a report on the agenda later, but just to give her the formal warning at the start. Always best to get in before we all start arguing, you know. So we really look forward to working with you. We know you've got a vast experience in education, so really looking forward to working with you. And the other big announcement, of course, is that it's Margaret Smith's last meeting today, I understand. Which, in a certain extent, I'm sad at that. It's sad that you are leaving because you've contributed well over the years. And you can get the chance to speak if you want. Speak before we just go right now before we get to formal business. But I'm sure the other people will want to thank you anyway for your service. Okay? You want to say a few words? Yeah.
Yeah, it's been an honour and a privilege to serve on the Education Committee and obviously recently the Education Executive, and I hope that I've added a decent teacher's voice to the committee and contributed with dignity and given my opinions when I've been asked. So thank you very much, and I look forward to my retirement. Thank you.
And you'll get your chance. When the report comes up, you can say your leave it as well. Okay. Anyone else? Any comments to make?
Could I just thank Margaret? I know that it's not just about coming on to the committee. There's a lot of work goes on behind the scenes, a lot of discussions, and you've served a significant period of time, and you have made a significant contribution, one that you should be proud of for your colleagues.
Councillor McHugh.
I should like to congratulate Margaret. You've made it. you're on your way. Look at Maureen sitting there smiling. But I would also like to say you've been a great advocate to teachers, but not only teachers, also for the early years and the staff that work in early years. And I appreciate that over the years, and certainly you've given me quite a bit of guidance over the years too, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it, on behalf of the religious, it's been a privilege working with you, Margaret. It must have taken down the retirement age. So it's been a real joy and a privilege. Thank you for your time here.
Anyone else? Somebody's got too many mics on.
Just on behalf of Children's Services and before that Education Services, I'd just like to extend our thanks to Margaret for all her contribution over the years. I think one of my observations would be that through the work of the LNCT, the management side and the teacher side have always enjoyed very good and productive relationships, and we've always managed to work our way through any difficult issues. So I would commend you for your collegiate way of working, and it's been a pleasure for us all to work with you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? If not, then we'll go to the agenda. Have we any apologies?
Yes, Convener, we have apologies from Fiona Craig, teacher representative.
Any other apologies? Okay. Declarations of interest? None. The minute of the last meeting? Comments? If not, then we'll accept that. Rolling action log, pages 9 to 11.
Convener, if I could interrupt just for a second, just before we get into the body of the agenda. Members will possibly be aware that there's been a highly critical HMIE report in relation to Sloan Primary School and the implications that are stemming from that. I wonder if we could possibly get a short statement from officers just to reassure us and reassure the public as to what's going on.
Well, yeah, it's going to the scrutiny committee on Wednesday. However, if it's a short statement for officers, that's fine.
Yeah, just to say that the paper going to scrutiny next week, where officers have been working very closely with the school since the inspection date, and have been engaging with the school staff and the acting head teacher to ensure that the progress has been made already in advance of the action plan being formally accepted by Falkirk Council.
Okay, is that it? Alright, okay, we'll move on to the rolling action log, sorry.
Excuse me, Convener, I wonder if you'd be able to make sure your microphone's on, please.
Certainly I can do that, yeah. Councillor McHugh, you want in?
No, that was me.
Right, okay, fine, thanks. So, where are we now? We'll go right to the rolling action log, pages 9 to 11. Any questions or comments? The Director would like to say something about the rolling action log.
Just in terms of the regional collaborative, just to update the committee on the ongoing work. The previous report outlined progress with the 5 different work streams and the fact that we're working to develop a Phase 2 plan which will be submitted to the Scottish Government and Education Scotland in early September. So it would be my intention to have a copy of that Phase 2 plan to come to the next meeting of the committee in early September. The other things, just to note, we now have further collaborative work going on between the 4 councils in the area of community learning and development. All 4 councils are working together with the Scottish Community Development Centre and the Improvement Service on an action learning programme which is focusing on sharing practice on community participation and involvement, looking at what's working well and what the challenges are, and indeed making sure that all 4 councils are working within the framework of the national standards for community engagement. This work will assist us with our rollout of locality plans, and there's a great deal of enthusiasm among the 4 councils, CLD, workforces in taking this work forward. Another couple of successes that we've had through the auspices of the various LNCTs. We have managed for the first time in 2019 to have coincident in-service days, so that in February 2019, for the first time, all 4 councils will have an in-service day that is common. That will allow staff from across the 4 councils to be working together on various different improvement activities for that one day. But the other thing that will be possible is that when Falkirk is having an in-service day and, for example, Stirling schools are in, we will be able to afford the opportunity for our staff to go and visit schools that are live and vice versa. The other thing that will be going on over the course of the summer is that Gary and his counterparts in the other 3 councils have agreed to do a review of the 4 councils' devolved school management schemes to look at common features, areas of best practice, and this is by way of preparation for what we anticipate will be included at the outcome of the Fairer Funding Review when the Scottish Government publishes its education bill in June. So that's where we are at present, and as I say, there will be a written report that will come to the September meeting of the Executive.
Okay. Councillor McHugh, do you want to speak?
Really just to make a comment that for years the education have been looking at integrating the in-service days, and also to highlight the fact that this will be a welcome for families and parents especially that work across the district.
Okay, thanks for that. The report is for noting. Is there anyone else?
Could I just add on what you were saying there, Samuel, about the in-service, and I think it's very welcome. I had my youngest inquirer so far from Larbert High School picking up on exactly this point of the school in-service days. Now, in May 2019, there appears to be a Thursday and a Monday, but not a Friday. And I said, well, I'm sure that would be something to do with the collaborative working that we were doing, and I would raise it. But I thought perhaps a nice thing for him to, it was inquiring how democracy was working, so well, I could possibly raise it at the Education Executive for you to have a look into. But it's good to know that our Larbert High students are taking an interest in when their holidays are coming up and seeing across ahead to all stages.
Yeah, I'm sure you would support that, and I'm sure democracy is working as well as it's ever done. Anybody else, any comments they want to make? Gary?
Just in answer to that specific question about having the Thursday and service day, what we do is we get notes of planned election days in advance from the corporate election team, and we try to make sure to alleviate parental complaints we've had in the past about closing schools on election days. And where we know they're on election day in the future, our LNCT colleagues are quite happy to grant an in-service day then, which eliminates some of the parental complaints sometimes that we have for closing schools. And it's up until now, it's worked really well. We've had a lot of success and feedback from parent councils and staff alike. Occasionally it does mean that we're running on a Thursday in-service day back in a Friday, but again, we're minimising some of the dates that we're actually having it for installs. And so far it's been fairly successful. And a lot of our councils also have copied that, to be fair.
Thanks, Councillor Kerr.
I would just like to ask Mr Greenhorn if he knows something that we didn't know for next meeting.
You don't realise that sometimes it's European election days and all that, they're programming in advance, but I don't know anything that you don't know.
In which case you definitely know something that we don't know.
I think that's a gotcha moment.
I think it's 2020.
I'd like to say that's the briefest report, Gary, is we're following for that. The next part would be Education Executive Membership, and it's obviously to recognise the fact that Maureen has been made representative of the Catholic Church. Do you want to say anything? Or? No. Good.
I'll say a few words, thank you. I'll say a few words. This is a whole new world for me. I started teaching at St Andrews Primary in 1979. Stayed there for 38 years, minus one, where I was doing the acting head down at St Francis Saviour's Primary School. I was given a few acting heads in St Andrews, but I always felt the higher up you go, the less time you have with the children, and that was why I went into teaching, to be with the children. I took early retirement at Christmas time, and I thought, I've got a pile of books, and I thought I'm going to get through these, and here I am back again in the education sector. So a whole new field, a whole new world. I'm going to watch House of Cards again and things like that, just so I can get an idea of maybe how these things work. I have to say, I know some of you from the school, Prince Kerr and Prince Linford and Adana as a parent from the school. And Karen away in the corner, I taught her in, I think it was 1980, and all she ever talks about is, what was it in the classroom? Frog Spawn, which I don't think we're allowed to do anymore, but that's how she remembers me, Frog Spawn. So I've had a wonderful career with initially Stirling Council and then Falkirk Council, loved every minute, have experienced a whole range of emotions and experiences, and this is the next chapter, so thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that. The next item is providing of meals during holidays for children entitled to free school meals. President Pugh, are you moving the report?
Yeah, I'll move the report. I assume
One
that
here
Gary
for the
would,
officers first.
sorry.
Yeah.
I assume that Gary would speak to the report first.
Yeah, I would assume that as well. I just want to get who's moving it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. The purpose of the report is to provide more information on the options and assessment around the meals for children. Members may recall at the last Education Executive, we were asked to bring a report to the next meeting on the provision of school meals during the holiday period for children who are entitled to free school meals. To my right is Sally Buchanan, the Fairer Falkirk manager. The whole programme is managed by our corporate colleagues, but as you'll see when we go through the report, it engages a whole range of different services and voluntary partners as well in this report. There are 3 recommendations in the report today: to note the success of the 17-18 holiday meal programme, to note the challenges outlined should members wish to adopt a more universally targeted provision, and to agree that the current plans that are already in place and being worked on for the 2018-9 holiday meal programmes continue, and that a report is presented at a future date evaluating those outcomes. Section 3 outlines the various background bits of information. I mentioned that the Education Executive, the last one, asked to bring a report. This is the report that they've asked to bring forward. Members may recall that in the 17-18 council budget, an allocation of £75,000, a one-off allocation of £75,000 was provided for that programme. In terms of the agreement at the council meeting, the agreement's there. It's to help families, support families within some of our most deprived areas with funding that will allow us to undertake with colleagues in the food bank services to enable food to be provided and distributed to families during the summer holiday period. Section 3.3, that proposal in terms of what we do in terms of the food bank area alone was £25,000. Over the course of 17-18, the Council and its partners delivered a number of very positive initiatives that were targeted at families and provided children and families with food during those holiday periods. Section 3.5 outlines some of the key factors that were built into that programme. I'll draw your attention to the fact that the team have worked very hard, and this is critical to ensure there's no stigma attached to delivering any of the food programme. And that is it's the biggest challenge we have when we're doing this, how to deliver where children and families are not stigmatised in any way, so people don't know what they're getting. And I have to say that looking at what we've done so far, we've been highly successful in achieving that target. Some of the key factors: identifying and targeting those families in advance of them making an application, looking at social work referrals, looking at referrals from agencies, voluntary sector. Again, we've worked very hard to make sure that when we identify families that are in need, we are able to provide some support to them. And where possible, linking food to other activities. And other activities, there's a number of successes in linking food provision to encouraging children to take part in active schools and activities during the holiday programme as well. Keeping bureaucracy to a minimum, again, is another thing we've tried to do. It's vitally important that some people, some families are put off by foreign film and bureaucracy. Anything we do, we've got to try to keep that to a bare minimum. Ensuring that the money was used to deliver food, again, that's a very important thing, so that if we cut back the administration of it, all the money that we get goes on delivering the food to targeted families and children. And probably another key thing is to develop a relationship with families, and that's very important. A number of subtle social work will be one of them, where families engage with us and we can find out a number of things and support families in a number of other ways. Again, it's breaking down the perceived barriers before to get the trust, and I can't stress highly enough that is a very important thing we've got to do. And also to learn from what's worked well, what's not worked well, and we try to develop it in the future. On that basis, we delivered a programme over summer 17, Christmas 17, and also Easter of 2018. In terms of section 4.1, it highlights the collaborative work that was done. The Falkirk Community Trust Active Schools team, Community Learning and Development, the Falkirk Food Bank, Aberlour Food Group, and a number of other local community organisations, all were involved, steered from the corporate side in terms of making the programme the success it was. In section 4.2, it individually goes through 6 individual projects. I'm not through them individually, but there are a lot of very interesting statistics, and you see the number of children and families that benefited from it. Often what I would say, it's not very often I say that we get things very reasonable for £75,000, and we've still got money left in doing it. What's been delivered, when you see the impact and when you look at the number of families and children that actually reach out to, I think the best value has been delivered in this programme, absolutely. It looks at individual active schools, it looks at the food bank provision, it looks separately at the summer food grant scheme that was there, and there was 8 community organisations received funding through the summer food grant scheme to deliver bespoke projects within their own community. It looks at the work undertaken by Community Learning and Development, and you'll see there that 178 families, including over 1,100 children, benefited from it and participated in schemes. Fun days, not just food only, but fun days, and that's an important part of some of the things that's been done. We've also did cookery demonstration with some families as well, and that's been a success as well. One of the things that looks at the work of the Aberlour Food Group, and also some of the money that was allocated to a food programme supporting looked after young people as well. So up to 6 projects, all when you evaluate them, worked really, really well. Going forward, we're already planned, given the success of the last year's programme, we already planned to do a number of initiatives this summer period, including the extension and provision of the Active Schools programme, which was highly successful last year. 5.3, it highlights that we're planning to work with the food bank to provide 200 parcels twice a week during the summer break. And again, should finances allow, the same will be done at the Christmas period as well. The small grant scheme will again run for those voluntary organisations or churches that want to run their own programmes. And again, that was very, very well received and it was a success last year. Questions were asked at the last meeting around the providing a free school meals during the holiday period. In Section 6 we looked at some of the challenges that we would have if we were to try and target this to all young people who are eligible for school meals over the summer period. 6.2 highlights that currently we've got just about over 2,000 and 2,000 primary and just over 1,000 pupils in secondary. So over 3,000 pupils in total receive free school meals just now. And most figures are taken from the annual census that run taken in February of every year. So the figures are fairly up to date and they're accurate. Some of the things that we would have to consider if we wanted to do a universal programme. I mentioned earlier on about stigmatisation, and that is vital. It's very difficult to find a programme that works without bringing some stigma to it, and we've got to work really hard so that any programme we have reduces that stigma. How to fund the additional significant cost of providing meals to eligible pupils. Recruitment of catering staff and cleaning staff, because we don't have any provisions that are really open during the summer holiday period other than those that provide the meals and meal service. So our schools aren't open, so if we wanted to do any universal programme we would have to really build in a lot of additional costs and factors to be able to do that, to deliver it. Access to schools during the holiday period for provision of meals. We do a lot of work in our investment programme in the school estate over the summer period, so we have to make sure that we balanced access to schools around the work that's going on in schools in terms of repairs and maintenance and reactive maintenance and things like that we do. Consideration of the minimum demand and uptake levels for viability. We have to consider that because at this point in time we don't know what the demand would be at local levels. So some areas of deprivation, albeit they may be semi-rural, what would be the numbers? What would we need the numbers to be before we consider it viable? I'm posing these questions, I actually don't know the answers to them, but these are the questions that we need to ask ourselves before we move out. How to assess the eligibility of P1 to P3 pupils who currently receive their free school meals as part of the universal provisions. We mentioned bureaucracy before. We may have to look at how we assess those pupils who just now they get a universally provided free school meal. The administration of such a scheme, how would it work? How meals be delivered if there was planned work on their schools. So again, there are a number of things they we've highlighted. In section 6.5, we struggled with this, when I'll be honest with you. It was very hard to work out what additional costs we would have to do it, but if we had to open all our schools, bring in staff and provide meals, and we assumed an uptake rate of 60 to 80%, we don't know that, we don't quite know what it would be. We estimated as a rough cost £500,000 to £750,000 per year it would take to do that. It's a significant amount of investment that would be required compared to what we're just now at 75,000 and the outcomes, the positive outcomes we're getting. So given the significant challenges outlined above, it would be difficult for members to adopt this without a significant amount of work being done and undertaken, and more importantly, to identify the resources that we need to make that available. In terms of Section 8, it looks at the implications. The implications of financial resources that we had was 75,000 of one-off funding. At the moment, in Section 8.2, we've got a balance of around £40,000 that's been carried forward to use for the planned work for the 2018 programme. I mentioned earlier on about best value. I think that does demonstrate for £35,000 what was best value in terms of where it's gone and some of the positive outcomes and the number of families and children that it's reached. In terms of equalities, it's very important that no matter what we do, we try to make sure that we balance it and we target some of the deprived areas, and more importantly, we do it in a way that reduces any stigma to anyone that's receiving any of the services. In Section 9, it is to conclude. The holiday food programme designed over the last year has proved a success for families, children, and also it's brought a number of children that have brought them into the activity stream as well, which is something not to be overlooked. And it's also planned that a fuller evaluation programme of this year's programme will be carried out later on in the year, so members can see just what outcomes were derived from it. Thank you. Happy to answer the question.
Okay, thanks for that, Gary. Councillor McHugh.
I welcome this report, Gary. Yet again, another success story and something that we definitely can build on. The report demonstrates a clear way forward, helping and supporting families without the stigma that can often be attached. The programme, whilst ensuring children eat, also gives the children a chance to participate in various activities and allows the various services that are involved, a chance to identify issues within families, getting the necessary support for these families, albeit benefit, welfare support, debt support, if there's illness in the family. So that gives us an extra chance to actually identify what is the family's need, whilst obviously supporting these children. The programme also has been a successful example of the various departments, community groups and charities coming together to work in all areas through our council to support our families that are really in need and to support them where the need actually is. The work is obviously ongoing and building. Again, there is a provision put in place for this year to build on that, as Gary has highlighted throughout our communities, and the programme also aligns with the Fairer Scotland duty.
Thanks for that. Anyone else? Councillor John. Sorry, Karen, you're coming next.
I'm happy to second the recommendation on Councillor McHugh. I think as the recognition across the public sector is moving away from universal provision to more targeted provision, I think that we have got the balance absolutely right in this case. Activity is a great leveller for children, and I had the pleasure of actually visiting the active schools and seeing all of these kids. Every one of them were running about, enjoying themselves, pink and sweaty, were able to pick up food, fruit, juice as required, and you would not have been able to indicate, a child that was in deprivation compared to others who parents were able to provide fully for them. And I think that that's important because it gives our children a lot more confidence along with their peers. They learn from their peers, and as do the parents. I think that again the support that they get from this situation, it really does help. So I think that we've got to be careful of not highlighting, particularly where we do have children in deprivation like this. We give them the best possible opportunity. And I think in the programme, as we started to design this, has got that right balance and going forward. And I think I would certainly support that we continue as we are and get the feedback from this year's session before starting to change the programme. And I think that also the feedback from the schools when the kids have gone back has been very, very positive. Hearing stories of some of the kids who haven't had the opportunities to participate in the various activities during the summer scheme, it stimulates their mind as well as their body. Not be able to come back and hold a pencil or a pen, not be able to remember the work that was done just 7 weeks before the school holidays began. But that has held them back. I think what we're doing here is really giving those that are at the greatest need the best opportunity.
Right. Thanks for that, Karen.
Hi, sorry if this is a silly question. I noticed at point 7 under consultation it said none. Has there ever been any discussions from the previous year with families, but with the children and young people themselves about how they found the scheme, and actually in terms of thinking how we roll it out? I think, especially given what you were saying about stigma, who better to answer that question as to how we can avoid it than the families themselves?
If I can come in on that one, thank you. Yes, we didn't consult before doing any of the activities, but actually we have consulted after carrying them out. We have done a light touch evaluation, collect the information back in from both the kids and the parents on how they found it, And we've actually worked closer, Community Learning and Development have worked quite closely with some of the families to get a lot more feedback, not actually just about school provision, but about some other areas of the cost of the school day, school uniform grants, that kind of thing. So yes, perhaps we should put a bit more detail in that around consultation. There wasn't any done in advance of doing the provision last year due to the requirements of getting something up and running quite quickly, but we have worked with those who have engaged in order to try and learn from them in terms of what we provide. Indeed, this year, again, we're trying to build on that relatively light touch because we need to get things going. But for example, the food bank boxes that will go out over the summer, the actual list or proposed list of rough contents has gone to some of the families for a bit of a sense check to actually make sure that there are things that they would find useful. And in fact, if there's a couple of things in there that they're going, do you know, we're never going to use that, there's no point in us providing them to them.
You okay with that? My apologies, it's your first meeting as well. It's like an election here, you know. But glad to have you on board, Margaret, and then Councillor Nimmo.
Thank you. It's just really some comments. I think many of us thankfully have little or no experience of being hungry and living in poverty and unable to access activities. I think this scheme allows families to access a lot of things which we take for granted. It can make such a difference to a lot of families, and I would hope for expansion in the future. And I think I'm pleased to see that there's no stigma attached to this worthwhile service. And also the development of trust. I think that is a huge thing for families. They need to be trusting people who are providing this service. I think we're only scratching at the surface probably of the statistics of families living in poverty, and I think it is shocking that this is a reflection of our 21st century Great Britain.
Yep. Thanks for that. Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks very much, Convener. I also welcome the report and the agenda today. It highlights some of the good work that was carried out with the last Labour-led administration. Having said that, it's not the report that I actually envisaged coming forward this morning. If you listen to the transcript of the previous Education Executive meeting, I quite clearly asked for information in relation to a pilot, but that hasn't been factored into the report today. And I do have an amendment which addresses that, Convener. I'm giving copies to Mr Moody to hand out, and I'll read it out while they've been handed out. The amendment is, this executive notes the great success of the Labour Holiday Meal Programme as detailed in the report. The executive also agrees that the current plans for 2018-19 continue. This executive instructs officers to bring forward an options report in relation to a pilot, very important word, pilot, it's in black and white this time, providing hot meals to all primary school children during the school holiday periods, including public bank holidays and in-service training days, etc. This is to be brought to the next meeting of the Education Executive on the 4th of September this year. The report should include all appropriate financial and accommodation information to support such a venture. And I'm happy to move that amendment.
Okay, thanks for that.
I'd like to second Councillor Nimmo's amendment. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Councillor Alexander.
Yes, the first thing I'd like to say is I'd like to congratulate Sally on what was an excellent piece of work last year, coming on to this year. And I congratulate the previous Labour Tory administration as well. I don't care who delivers these types of programmes. If they're coming and for the benefit of the people, then we've genuinely welcomed any recognition that's coming. With regards to the project, the amendment, much of the amendment is contained within the motion, and we accept that particular point. The part that's not is the part in relation to the post-pilot scheme. And I think it's very unfortunate that we're doing things the wrong way around again, that we're doing things by raising expectations and before we know the costs. And I think that that's the wrong way for us to operate as a responsible authority. This year is the toughest financial year that we've faced, and the likelihood is that next year is going to be even worse, if not then hopefully it's going to be slightly better, but not much, all indications. And we've heard from the Director of Finance with his dire warnings of the likelihood of poorer financial settlement and £20 million black hole. So I think that anything that raises expectations, we have the responsibility as an authority, and as a responsible authority, to have that information checked first, before it becomes public knowledge, before it becomes part of a report to Council. And so I would ask Mr Nimmo if he would drop that part of it until he has the information, and then bring it back to the authority. It's very easy to support motions or amendments, ask for more. Very easy to do that. It's not always responsible, because if we do raise expectations and we can't deliver, then we're letting that community down. If we raise expectations and even if we can deliver, then where is the savings to be made to meet additional costs? That has to be thought out, and that's something that really requires to be thought out before it becomes part of any motion or amendment in this particular committee. I've no doubt Councillor Nimmo in his sincerity in wishing to see this improvement. No doubt about that whatsoever. But we all have a responsibility to all of the kids right across the lines and breadth of the local district. And I think the example that's been shown by the staff in the development of the programme we have at the moment is it shines like a beacon. And what I would say is, there's an old adage, if something's not broken, you don't need to fix it. And at this point in time, this performance of this section of the department is most definitely not broken.
Just before you come in, Councillor Nimmo, Councillor Kerr.
I also welcome the report regarding the scheme on point 8.2, and we're saying that there's 35, it cost us 35,000 last year. The extra 40,000 we saved, so that's that'll be 115,000 into this year. Is that why we're able to bring more children, identify more children to the programme?
Just to clarify that point, 75,000 that was identified in the budget was one-off money. It wasn't a budget, it was one-off funding. We've spent 35,000 of that in total, so there's 40,000 money left, and that's what this year's plans have been outlined on, and we're quite confident that we can deliver equally a good programme as we did last year, this year, using those funds.
Councillor Nimmo, you've already spoken with you. You want to respond to Councillor Mark Lennon?
No change in standing orders.
Councillor Alexander, you've asked a question to Councillor Nimmo. We've no change standing orders. But you did ask a question.
No, that's for a rhetorical question.
It was a rhetorical question. Could you answer the rhetorical question?
I'm quite happy to answer any questions. I mean, the amendment that I've just put forward is straightforward. It's asking for an options report on a pilot. There's no commitment financially or otherwise. It's asking for a report, which is a normal course of affairs. It's also asking for their financial and accommodation issues and information related to that. So I think it's quite clear. I stand by the amendment. I'm not prepared to change it.
Thanks. Councillor Patrick.
Thank you, Convener. Perhaps I should say at the start that I welcome that all the comments that have been made so far, which have highlighted the importance of supporting the family and therefore supporting the children as part of that consideration. I'm somewhat concerned about the Section 6, but I do welcome the initiative to try and find an appropriate solution to the problem. I recognise the dilemma of the primary P1 to P3, and I think that's perhaps going to be a particular issue which might be difficult to solve. I don't, in actual fact, particularly welcome the amendment which indicates the need at this stage to provide hot meals for all primary children during the holidays. I prefer the target of making sure that families are supported, and all families which are needing the support will get it throughout the summer period. And I welcome the direction that the report is indicating of producing a further consideration as to how, in fact, the funding indicated, if necessary, at 6.5 is pursued. I do believe, in actual fact, that the report is an excellent report and is indeed going in the right direction, which we need to get more information on. And I do believe at this stage that the amendment is indicating a step further than I would think would be appropriate.
Anyone else?
Karina, can I ask a question?
Certainly, there you go.
It's in relation to the prospect of a pilot. By holding a pilot in itself, it would be a discrete area, and therefore would that not then start to create some inequity in even having that particular pilot?
Well, my answer to that, and I'm not the expert on it, would be the pilot would be done, if a pilot goes forward, it would be a pilot with a footprint that would fit the whole area. But I'll come in later on that.
Councillor Coley.
Thank you. I wonder if officers might be able to tell us a little bit about the whole family approach, because I'm quite interested in how this programme has very much not just targeted children requiring food, but looked at that whole family approach, and I wonder if you maybe can say a little bit about that.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. Through the provision of the food at the food bank, that was a food parcel that went to the family, and it wasn't up, or we took the decision it wasn't up to us to try and provide food only to the children. We provided food to the family at that point, and left it up to the family to do what with. We have also put a lot of effort into, or my colleagues in community learning and development have put a lot of effort into trying to develop relationships with families as part of this scheme. So the provision of food or the engagement of the children into activities has opened doors to work further with the families, and not with everybody, because not everyone's open to that, but with those who are, they've taken forward a number of different initiatives, from actually getting a bed for a family, where actually they found out through discussions that wasn't available, to working with some families around developing skills while children are back at school, and doing further work around actually developing the skills of the parents, which may or may not prepare them for work, but certainly will improve their confidence along the way as well and things. So a variety of different things, nothing that definitive, but very much working with each family who's open to that to see what they can do to improve the circumstances of those families. Also highlighting things like our entitlement calculator around checking what benefits you're entitled to, and the support you can get at the Advice Hub over in Grangemouth and from various other council services such as debt advice, money advice, welfare benefits, that kind of thing.
That's really helpful, thank you.
Councillor Murphy.
Yes, I think that I understand where Councillor Number is coming from in terms of saying about having a pilot in order to try to establish asking for the cost to be looked at and the report to come forward, but we already see in 6.5, 6.6 some of the highlighting of the problems that actually are anticipated even in going down that route. And as Councillor Alexander was saying, doing a pilot, which we already probably know in advance, is not something that we should be able to deliver. Would be, I think, in a responsible step. Additionally, as Councillor Meiklejohn is saying, it does, even in suggesting where should we have this pilot to target it most effectively, will raise eyebrows, will highlight that particular area. I think that we've seen, and I welcome very much the report and the work that's been done, and again add my voice in congratulations to this programme. The priority must be the universality of all what we can deliver, taking that holistic approach, identifying that there's a great benefit in that the children that we know who are living in poverty, as we've identified in our SOAR plan, sometimes it's their expectations, it's what they don't even realise that they are not expecting the same as other children from their families because they have that poverty of aspiration as well. And I think very much we need to focus on what's important here. The programme has been working well. I think developing that programme along the lines that we've got just now, rather than doing something unrealistic and committing ourselves to something which we know that in the end may be very, very difficult to deliver, as is already outlined in this report, probably isn't the way forward, and I would just rather that we go forward positively and support the report and the recommendations as they are.
Thanks for that, Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, Convener. I wasn't going to speak on this, but I've just remembered a few conversations that I had as a member of the Trust Board with the active school staff, and obviously the fact that we are providing what I would say is a summer sports scheme rather than what could be acknowledged as a charitable food package. And I would just like to again reiterate that it's great that everybody is working together, third sector, the Trust and the Council, to deliver this programme. I was listening this morning, and I can't remember the name of the lady, but there was an interview about the fact that childhood and pensioner poverty has increased dramatically over the last decade as the need for help increases, but the safety net and the benefits that provide that help have been decreasing. And I think that, as you said, Margaret, I think that as a society we should be absolutely ashamed that we are having this discussion this morning, that there is such a thing as food banks, and I think that we should to acknowledge that there are children going back to school, especially after the long break in the summer, malnourished in this day and age. I think that we should be doing absolutely everything we can, and I appreciate that our resources are diminishing also, but I think of all the priorities that we have, having children taken out of food poverty should be our number one.
Well, could I just say before we go to the vote, unless somebody else wants in, though, the pilot scheme itself, I'll let you in first.
Thank you. I welcome this as well, and not particular this and amendment, the whole thing. I think it's really good. As a local minister and as a local church leader, we were one of the people that wanted to see these things actually taking place in our community, and have tried a number of initiatives over the period of time, along with another package of social initiatives, mental health, living skills, different things in a holistic approach. So I think it's really good, and I think it's good to see what's being guided and what's targeted for this year. I just wonder if Councillor Nimmo could be more specific in relation to what he sees in relation to the pilot project, what that actually is, what that actually looks like, what you're actually looking for. Because I see good arguments at both sides, so if somebody was keen to drive this kind of thing forward, I'm kind of wondering where we're actually going here, what are we actually looking for in terms of a pilot project.
Councillor Kerr.
I've read, I don't know if I'm allowed to speak again, I just want a bit of clarity. If I've got a bit of clarity.
You're asking a question.
Asking a question. Probably similar to what's just been stated. The pilot, so are we saying that we're going to give a area or a school hot meals for the summer and Christmas time, holidays, and then we cost that to see how much it will cost, how much it's cost us? Or are we saying that's what we would like, commit costings for that before we run the scheme?
Can I just say, my understanding before Councillor McHugh will come in and wind up, my understanding of what's been asked for here is a pilot. It's not to spend any money, it's to look at how we would do that in a particular area. So we're not talking about spending any money. And I would say as well, my understanding of the amendment is, it's not an unusual thing for us to do to run pilot schemes. We run pilot schemes on countless things. And it's also not an unusual thing for us to find extra money. And we can find extra money. And by the time the pilot comes back, and you'd be talking about probably next year before it would come in. None of the councillors here sit at the end of the year and agree a budget. So it would be a case of where would you find that money in the budget, but that's something that can be overcome 1,000 times. We'll have different priorities and we pull different amounts of money for different areas into this. This is an excellent report and we congratulate everybody on the report. But as has been highlighted by a number of speakers, this is a major problem. And the fact that it has been so successful is the reason we want to look at a pilot. And bring a pilot in and bring it into an area if it's required. And then if people didn't want to spend more money on that particular, if somebody says at the end of the day, we would rather spend money on this item than spend money on this, giving kids meals that need meals, well, that's a matter for themselves. Personally, I'm delighted to see that the money is going to be small grant scheme will operate to volunteer organisations, churches. I mean, at the last budget, cut the money to the Salvation Army. So that hopefully we can get some funding back up to them. It's important to say.
I don't think that's correct.
No, it's not.
No, that's not correct.
Well, that's not a point of order.
No, apologies.
That's okay, but it is correct, so take it from me. So anyway, what I'm going to say to you is, get it clear. This is this amendment doesn't ask you to spend money. This amendment asks for a report to be brought back to see how that wonderful situation can be improved. And surely we want to build on success. Councillor Nimmo, you've already spoken. Councillor McHugh, do you want to wind up?
Councillor Nimmo's amendment actually have grave concerns. The report highlights numerous times about the stigma. I think what we're doing things differently. I think this would be a step backwards to run a pilot trying to provide hot meals for one particular area. I think the way we're doing it and the success of last year should be built on, and I think we are actually getting it right and moving forward with it, and more children, more families will be able to be helped, and I think the report as stands is welcome.
I think you're misunderstanding what's being asked for. The pilot is to ask how at the end of the day we would improve the system right through.
I'm not misunderstanding.
But you're going to try it in one area first. And we do that 1,000 times. Mr. Alexander, we're moving to the vote.
I get convenient again.
Councillor Meikle-John.
I'm sorry, but you've contradicted
Councillor Meikle-John, we're moving to the vote.
You've contradicted something that you just said 2 minutes ago. That you were talking.
Moving to the vote.
I'm sorry. No, I think people need to understand again what they're voting on.
We're moving to the vote. You need explanation.
You said that you were talking about a pilot that was a whole council. You've just contradicted what you've then said and doing it in a smaller area.
Councillor Nimmo, Councillor Meikle-John.
You also spoke.
Councillor Meikle-John, we are moving to the vote.
Can I ask for clarification?
Mr. Alexander, we're moving to the vote.
Can I ask for a legal ruling?
Move to the vote. You can have a legal ruling if you want. Yeah.
You can ask for a legal ruling with regards to standing orders regarding when someone who's wound up a motion, as Councillor McHugh did, whether anyone else can speak at the end of that.
Yes, the convener has the floor at that point as he moves us to the vote. And if I could clarify for the purpose of the motion and amendment that is before the committee, we have the recommendations which are contained within the report at paragraph 2, moved by Councillor McHugh and seconded by Councillor Meikle-John. We have an amendment which has been circulated. So the amendment is in the form that is in writing, and it's moved by Councillor Nimmo and seconded by Councillor Bissett. It may be helpful, I think, to explain to your members of the committee that the vote is taken by calling the names of the councillors who are asked to indicate whether they are for the motion or for the amendment, but also in this case the names of the 3 religious representatives who are entitled to vote on this matter, as it's a matter in the council's capacity as education authority. Councillor Alexander.
Motion.
Councillor Bissett.
Amendment.
Councillor Colley.
Motion.
Councillor Coombs. Councillor Goldie.
Amendment.
Councillor Harris.
Motion.
Councillor Kerr.
the amendment.
Councillor McHugh.
For the motion.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
For the motion.
Councillor Murtagh.
Motion.
Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
Councillor Patrick.
The motion.
Mrs Harkins.
The motion.
Reverend Rollo.
Amendment.
And Mrs Tate.
Motion.
Convener, there are 9 votes for the motion, there are 6 votes for the amendment, and the motion accordingly is carried.
Okay, thanks for that. Next item, item 7, expansion plan. Carrie.
Thanks very much, Chair. This will be a brief report for Ellen and childcare. Copies of the report outlined in section 1.1. There's 2 aims of the report before the Education Exec today. It's just to, as we did last time, to confirm the overall funding package that's agreed for both revenue and capital up to 21-22, and to provide an update on the infrastructure expansion plans for year 3 and year 4, totally 19-20 and 2021. There are 3 recommendations before the Education Exec today to note the overall package of funding that's available, to agree the proposals in terms of the rollout of the expansion plan for years 3 and 4, and to request that the Director continues to provide the Education Executive with regular updates on the progress made in terms of our expansion plan. Section 3 outlines the background. I'll not dwell too much on this, instead to perhaps look at section 3.2. And section 3.2 summarises the 5 key areas that we've already had agreement on at Education Exec. And I'm pleased to say that I'm really pleased that we got agreement on these things. It looks at we've agreed the 5 models of delivery. The delivery model being planned throughout the school estate. We've already agreed to progress with infrastructure plans for year 1 and year 2. We've agreed the funding to provide additional staff and resources in the support teams. We're very pleased to say that these teams are being strengthened just now, following the decision the last time. We really need that support to make this whole project a success. And we've agreed very positive changes to the early years of admissions policy. Section 3.3 and section 3.4. It just highlights that the funding was agreed following a meeting at COSLA at the end of April, and the Scottish Government wrote to every local authority on the 1st of May, outlining the revenue and capital funding right up to 21-22. In terms of section 4, looking at year 1. Year 1, we've got, at the last meeting we agreed to 21 infrastructure projects, added to the 4 that were already agreed initially. There's 25 projects that the team are currently running with just now. And that's why I have to stress we need that bit extra support, both in terms of our own teams and also the teams at development services, in terms of the facilities, the technical team, the designers, the architects. We need that support, and we're bringing people in now to help us with that. In terms of the plans for year 3 and years 4, they're outlined in section 4.2. They're also detailed in appendix 1. In year 3, there's 13 further infrastructure projects that we're planning to do, and year 4 is a final 15. A hugely significant amount of infrastructure work that's going to go on within the fall criteria, and with it, no doubt bring the economic benefits derived from it. Notwithstanding that, at the end of it, what we will have is an early infrastructure fit for purpose that will serve both pupils and families in terms of flexible approaches to early learning childcare within the area. Section 4.3 outlines and we've been very pleased to report there's been positive meetings continue to be held with the Scottish Childmining Association and also our local private nursery, and we will continue to engage with both parties and also to those childminders that are not members of the SCMA as we go through the summer months. We will be continuing to engage with them as to how they could help fulfil some of the aims and missions of the overall project. Section 5 outlines some of the consultation process that's happened, and again I would have to say that the consultation is really ongoing. We will be consulting locally as we go through the project, and we'll be consulting, as I said earlier on, with the SCMA chairman has read through it. So I see it very much as an iterative consultation process, because we're continually consulting various people and various groups in various localities through this project. Section 5.2 outlines that all our infrastructure projects are aligned to, most importantly, the strategic property review. We've got to make sure that the council makes best use of its assets, and we've got to make sure that what we do or we intend to do within the school estate dovetails with the council's wider strategic property aim, and that is a vital thing that we've got to do. Also, we're about to engage with some consultation, some dialogue with the Hub Company to see what they could do in terms of some of the infrastructure projects as well. And again, that's a very positive thing, because it derives benefits back into the Falkirk Council area as well. Section 6 outlines the financial resources. These are broken down to year by year. I have to say there's a typo, and I apologise for that. The total funding for Falkirk in terms of 611 is 16.052 million, not 16.050 million. So that £2,000 that's been committed is to be of vital importance to us. I apologise for that typo mistake for the executive today. So again, outlines the capital revenue funding we've got. Capital of £16 million is going to be invested in Falkirk. That is a significant amount of investment, and one that we all can feel proud of and be part of the project. And I can assure you that there will be regular reports, as there has been in the past, to make sure that everyone feels part of that project and are kept up to date with the positive progress that's been made on it. Revenue funding, £19 million is what we're going to get in 21-22. A massive amount of money that's going to go into our early years programme and into early learning and childcare. So in total, £35 million, and that's why we need some of the extra staff we've been asking about and kindly got the permission to do, to bring in infrastructure teams to make sure we can roll out this project. The hard work now really begins, because there's no excuses. We've got all the money. We've now got to roll our sleeves up and make sure we deliver for Falkirk what we promised to do. What we say to the executive is there's £6 million of funding that we're still to get a share of. That's in relation to the additional graduate programme. So when we get that money, our share of it, I'll report back and confirm what it will be. So at the moment, we've still to get a share of £6 million. It also notes that £308,000 of additional revenue support grant was also received in 18-19 as part of the GEE redistribution settlement as well. So the overall settlement figures, as noted, that the money above gives us now a chance to progress in full with our plans. And I'm very pleased to say that we can go ahead with all our plans now. It means that Karen next to me, for those of you new to the committee, Karen Thompson is the early year project manager, and her and her team are engaged in this on a day-to-day basis and work extremely hard to make sure we deliver these projects. In terms of the risk, 6.3, I will always stress that in terms of the huge amount of infrastructure projects, there always a risk in the delivery of projects in time, but if there is any issues, we'll bring them back to the executive. We've also got to make sure that the planned expenditure comes in line with the resources that we have. That's not uncommon from anything that we do in the council. We want to try to deliver things as best we can in the budget that we've got. 6.4 just highlights, for those of you new to the executive, that what we've tried to do is make sure the expansion plans are done, targeting areas of deprivation where we can. Obviously, if there's space in a school that we can use, that can be used now, we would use it as well. But in the main, our plans are targeted in bringing projects forward in areas of deprivation. And for deprivation, we're using free meal entitlement. Conclusion, section 7. Again, I have to say that these are one of the most ambitious and exciting challenging programmes that I've ever been involved in, and I've been here 13 years now. And it's exciting even to this day to try to roll out an ambitious programme like this. And I'm very confident in the team that we have that we can do this, and we can do this well. And the team is not just the team within Children's Services, it's a team that expands to the corporate side and development services that offer the technical support that we need to do it as well. So I'm very pleased to bring the report. The next report, I would say, would probably detail out these projects on a ward-by-ward basis in a bit more detail to give you some indications of what we're doing on site every project. But the report before the committee today, I'm happy myself and Cam to take any questions on it.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor McHugh.
I move this report with great excitement and I welcome it. As the Education Executive, I'll be well aware this is one of numerous reports on the Baldock, and now that we finally have the money and the go-ahead, I'm really looking forward to the programme being rolled out. Thank Karen and her team and Gary for the huge amount of work, and really just to highlight in the report the conclusions. The fact that this is the most ambitious, exciting and challenging infrastructure project that Falkirk Council has undertaken, and the fact that the revenue and capital funding allocations for the whole project is now in our hands and allows us to get on with this project. It's going to be a fantastic way forward for our families and for our children, and I welcome it.
Okay, thanks for that. Anyone else? Councillor Meikle, John?
I'm happy to second, but will reserve my right to come back at future.
Yeah, okay with that. Anyone else? Margaret?
Yeah, just a couple of points. Again, the expansion is taking place, but every time we see it, I just keep saying it's going to cost a heck of a amount of money, take an awful lot of effort. We already had graduates in place in a lot of nurseries in the shape of teachers, and they've all gone. The full-time teachers in nurseries, and they have gone. So we're replacing teacher graduates with other graduates. We have to have quality in the quantity of staff that we are and going to employ in Falkirk. But that again is going to come at a cost, because we're going to have to pay more money for the staff as they progress through, as they become graduates, as they become managers, etc., etc. And the staffing budget, I think, will be enormous.
Okay, thanks for that. Anyone else? Councillor Noah?
Just a couple of questions, Convener. I'm just wondering, what is the anticipated increase in staffing when this is going to be fully operational? Do we have any indication as to that? And also, how is it going to be funded in future years as far as the staffing is concerned?
Apologies, I can't answer the increase of staffing offhand, but it was contained in the last report we brought to the Education Exec, and it will be contained in the next report. There's a significant amount of increased staffing that we intend to bring on across the earlier sector. The funding of it is there, that what we're going to get in 2021 is effectively the first full financial year of our first full year cost, and the council are getting over 19 million of revenue funding from the government. That 19 million will continue year on year after that. Obviously it will be subject to inflation and all the normal settlements. So effectively that is the final step up to a level playing field of funding, which is over 19 million, and the government would continue that funding as they do through GAE going forward, subject to the normal inflationary pressures. So we expect that's the base of what to get to. As Margaret did say as well, there's a huge amount of that revenue funding will be in staff, and I can assure members that one of the things we are striving for is quality is at the heart of what we do. Quality in terms of staff and quality in terms of the infrastructure that we put in. So quality is at the heart of everything that we do.
So will that funding be ring-fenced then, Gary? Because obviously the financial settlements are reducing year on year, so we'll have to be careful with that.
We'll have to be careful. Effectively, what we do have is effectively ring-fenced just now. I can't say what would happen in 22-23, but at the moment we've clearly got what we want, and we've got it broken down year by year, and that gives us a measure to make sure our projects are balanced year on year. Ultimately, we've got to bring up to the level stepped approach in the final year, year 4, to make sure what we have is both within the capital resources and the revenue resources that we have. And we're fairly confident that we can deliver that.
Thanks for that. Anyone else? Mr. Kerr?
My memory serves me right, it was me raised at the last meeting that it's an extra 358 staff that we need. I've got concerns that we can achieve that. A couple of things just for Gary. Gary, the structures for the early learning, will there be new structures or the mobile units, or will it be some each?
Again, just to confirm, I think that my colleague here just shown me the figure is 358, so if I can congratulate you, you're absolutely spot on with that. That's the circa 350 FTE equivalents. Because the part of work in that, we expect that figure to be higher, but 350 is the FTE figure that we've got. In terms of your second question, it's very much a mixed bag. Each school is individual, each school is always unique to what we do, and we try to deliver a package based on what capacity the school's got, the areas in the school ground as well. Mainly it's looking at what capacity the school's got within the school itself to expand. So it's a mixture of internal improvements, extensions, and there is some modular units that will be provided as well. So it's a mixed bag, but what we can assure you is once we get the finished article, it will be a quality approach.
Thank you. Final question, an easy one I think. Where's Inchlear?
Stennis Muir.
Stennis Muir, it's down in Vale View at the back of Asda.
Oh, no. I knew every other one, but I didn't know where that was.
It's one of our unique establishments that's technically standalone, but still only operates term time at the moment, but it's got provision for eligible 2s and 3 and 4 year olds at the moment.
I'll need to visit.
She's looking at geography class. Anyone else? Councillor Alexander.
As convener, the 350 potential new jobs, what a wonderful opportunity is for young people to get involved in that profession. And young people that previously may have been denied the opportunity to do so. I think it's wonderful news, and I certainly welcome the opportunities that it creates, not just for the 350 individuals who will take up the posts, but also for the recipients of the service, because part of the attraction of this is to make flexibility in terms of people rejoining the workforce. People who previously were restricted because of childcare costs and childcare limitations in terms of the ability to track down appropriate childcare. You know, this is a marvellous opportunity for people, and I think demonstrates the competence, but also the determination of the Scottish Government to improve the standards within home care, within the daycare. Childcare. Got there eventually, and I think that's welcome. I think also, just as I paid tribute to the previous administration in the past item earlier on today, convener, I think we should pay tribute to the leader of Falkirk Council in this particular instance, because the meeting that was mentioned at the end of April, there was a motion on that particular agenda moved by the Labour group within COSLA to change the methodology of the funding settlement, and in a manner which would have been to the detriment of Falkirk Council to the tune of £4.5 million. The Councillor Meikle-John, first of all, was part of the SNP group, was deputy leader of the SNP group, persuaded the SNP members to stick with the original proposals, and as a consequence of that, the motion was defeated and Falkirk got every penny that we asked for. So I think we need to pay tribute to the leader of the council for her diligence and abilities in that particular front, and to welcome the additional £4.5 million that will be invested in Falkirk as a consequence of her actions.
Right, anyone else? Councillor Meikle-John, you asked for the right to come back in?
No, I'm content with the debate as it is.
Okay, that's fine. Anyone else? Councillor McHugh, you want to wind up? No. Okay, well there's no amendments, so the report's agreed. The next item, exclusion guidelines, and David, you going to speak to that?
Thank you. This paper is to present a revised exclusion policy, guidelines and procedures for children's services. Section 2 contains recommendations that the Education Executive is asked to agree the revised policy on exclusions attached to Appendix 1 and to request the Director of Children's Services to present a revised policy in Education Executive in 2019 which will incorporate the latest best practice guidance from Education Scotland. The background of this report, the previous policy was agreed in 2012. This policy takes into account the changes that have taken place within Falkirk Council since then and the establishment of Children's Services, which were formed in April 2015, and also to provide greater consistency in the terminology and the configuration of the service. I am aware that we are going to undertake a further process of revision in light of the Included Engagement Involved Part 2 guidance that has been recently issued to councils. However, that's a substantial piece of work. It's likely to take most of this year, and it was important that we brought this policy up to date as quickly as we possibly can, and hence it's been presented to you today. Section 4 summarises the main amendments within the policy, and the full amendments are provided in Appendix 2. 4.2, the paragraph, section 4.10 requires an educational psychologist to be fully involved in the process. In terms of the service configuration, that wasn't practical for us. However, schools will still be engaging with an educational psychologist for advice and guidance throughout, but it also makes reference to other professionals that may be more appropriately placed to advise and guide the school when making the decision to exclude a young person from school. And the other sections are detailed for you there. The consultation, the policy, we have spoken to all our head teachers at length in regard to this policy, and they're satisfied with the interim amendments that are taking place. As we progress forward with the development of the revised policy, we'll be engaging with our wider stakeholder groups, and that will include parent groups, pupil groups, staff groups, etc., to ensure that the policy is fully informed and takes account of everyone's views and opinions as we move forward. So I'd like to propose that I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks.
I'd like to move this report as is.
Okay,
Happy to second, Convener.
fine, thanks. Any questions, Councillor Patrick?
Convener, I welcome the report. Could I, however, make reference to the 4.2 when it mentions, as has been indicated, that the need to refer to an educational psychologist has been removed. Can I ask if that in actual fact is purely because there isn't any educational psychology support available to make this possible?
The previous policy required the educational psychologist to be involved throughout the whole process. In terms of the time allocation, that was proving impractical for the service to facilitate that particular piece of work. The report still includes sections where the school are required to engage with a number of professionals, and educational psychologists is one of those that would be actively encouraging schools to do so. And I've spoken with Nick and his team, and he is obviously looking to prioritise their involvement in relation to the children and young people, particularly those disadvantaged that are looked after children and those that potentially on the Child Protection Institute, that he will definitely support that within schools. And it's really just in relation to other probably lower priority cases where their involvement might not necessarily actually be required.
I regret that, despite the fact I did read the detailed report, but I didn't mark the relevant bit where it pays reference to the educational psychologist. I just would like to be absolutely reassured that although the need for automatic referral, which appears to have been the case in the past, that has been withdrawn. I would like to really have complete reassurance that wherever necessary this vital service will in fact still be available.
I can reassure you it will be Appendix 8 details the exclusion procedure checklist, and in the bottom of Appendix 8 the educational psychologists still feature as part of those who require to be considered prior to exclusion. And I will obviously take your concerns up and ensure that those features we move forward to ensure that all of our children get adequate support.
Okay with that? Anyone else? No, there's no amendment. We'll move on. We'll move to 9, which is a motion from Councillor Cole. Councillor Cole.
Right, thank you. I raised a motion about the family cap and the clause which is commonly known as the rape clause, as I felt it was important to have clarity about both Council's policy to support women and children and how we consider how it may impact on our wider work to alleviate child poverty. Oh, sorry, it went off. To be clear, the rape clause is simply a depressing symptom of a policy that punishes families and children. The 2-child limit for tax credits for children applies to third or subsequent children born after the 5th of April 2017. But, and it's a big but, it also applies to new claims for universal credit, a policy we all have significant concerns over and which will cost this council hundreds of thousands of pounds and our citizens even more. So new claims means that if you lose your job, or you have to reduce hours, become ill, have a partner die and have to claim universal credit, your third child will not receive support. Engender, which is a leading gender equality organisation, said in its response to the Scottish Parliament on this issue that an estimated 174,000 children will be affected and nearly 51,000 families in Scotland. They will lose up to £2,780 per year for each additional child. To give you, that's about £53 a week, and I think any of us trying to lose £53 a week would be a challenge. Nearly 2/3 of children affected live in low-income working families. Across the UK, the family cap will push 200,000 more children and 510,000 families into poverty. This should worry each and every member in this room with the impact on the delivery of the Council's priorities and outcomes. I'll remind members to what the Council agreed just 2 years ago, that we should address the impact of poverty on children. How can a policy like the family cap do anything but harm this objective? There is a disproportionate effect on some groups, lone female parents, and on families with larger families, on families where larger families are more usual, including religious, faith, BME and refugee communities. It will also affect families where 2 families blend into one through marriage or a relationship. It is worth noting that women who are lone parents have already suffered disproportionately under so-called welfare reform and will continue to do so, with an estimated loss of £4,000 a year, a 20% drop in living standards and a 17% drop in disposable income by 2020. This should worry each and every member with the impact on the delivery of the Council's priorities and outcome. It's worth noting that the Conservatives didn't pluck this policy out of the air. It comes from the USA, where the Conservatives like to look for their libertarian policies. In the US, some states decided that they would try out this policy to punish children to prevent women on welfare from having children. It's also worth noting that many states have subsequently abandoned these policies because they, unsurprisingly to anyone who'd even thought about it sensibly, resulted in higher levels of poverty, worsening health and social outcomes for children, and higher levels of food and housing insecurity. And we've been talking about food insecurity earlier today. I sincerely wish that when the government borrows ideas, that actually listens to the evidence of the impact on these policies. It's also worth noting what Engender said on the UK government's equality impact assessment. They stated that the assessment was little more than a cursory nod, that women were more likely to be affected, and that the discriminatory nature of this policy was not considered. As this Council assesses itself and how policies impact on equality and poverty, so should the UK Government, which has so far resisted all calls to undertake not only effective EQIAs but to assess the cumulative impact of its reforms. Turning to the rape clause itself, I can't state enough how appalling I find this. The Conservatives state this is simply a way of ensuring women who have a child as a consequence of rape are financially supported. But there has been little or no thought into the impact of disclosing rape to a faceless individual in the DWP, forcing women to disclose sexual violence at a time and context not of their own choosing, re-traumatises women and can exacerbate PTSD. and increases the sense of shame and isolation. It's not, as Esther McVeigh said at the Holyrood Committee, a double support to women that provides an outlet that they might possibly need. Our staff, in advice and information, social work and beyond, will have to be prepared to help women in this situation and in dealing with the family cap itself. I've had conversations with officers since I put forward the motion to investigate the matter, and brought this motion to the committee to ensure that we are well prepared. Despite my disgust at this policy, and I hope that the UK Government will see sense, planning for its impact on Falkirk's bairns cannot be ignored. Equally, it's critical we have clear assurances at UK level that appropriate mechanisms are in place to assess the cumulative impact of welfare reforms on women, children and families, and on equality groups. And particularly in the ongoing reluctance of the UK Government and absence of impact assessments up to now, that Scottish ministers are commissioning ongoing national and local analysis on key shared policy priorities such as equality, in-work poverty, child poverty and health and wellbeing outcomes. I must say, in proposing the motion and raising my concerns about the family cap, that it's sad to say that both in Scotland and in Falkirk we must find ways and scarce resources to mitigate rather than instead to invest in improvements in children's lives. So I'll just read out the motion. Council notes with concern the implementation of the 2-child limit for tax credits for children born after the 5th of April 2017 and for new claims for universal credit, and particular notes the concerns over the so-called rape clause, which, in order to receive financial support for a third child, forces women to disclose sexual violence at a time and context not for their own choosing. Council therefore agrees to write to the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions to express the concern of the members of Falkirk Council and seek assurances that comprehensive equality impact assessment, fully exploring the impact of the family cap and cumulative impact of social security changes on women, children, family and equality groups have been carried out, and that the impact will continue to be closely monitored. To write to the Cabinet Secretary for Communities, Social Security and Equalities to seek assurances that the Scottish Government will commission ongoing national and local analysis of the impact on the family cap on key shared policy priorities. And instruct the Chief Executive to ensure that the training needs of Falkirk Council staff across all departments are considered, in particular for advice and social work, to be able to approach the issue of non-consensual conception of a third child with women who are making benefit claims, including appropriate referral routes and any additional resources that are required to be allocated to the Commission, and provide this report to the next Council meeting. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Secondly.
Absolutely, I'm happy to, well, I say I'm happy to second Councillor Cully, but as Councillor Cully says, it's yet again depressing that we have to bring issues like this, as we so often do, to try to mitigate the effects of Westminster policies. I think, as Councillor Cully was saying, our sole plan commits us to addressing the impact of poverty on children as the most important of the 4 key priorities that we have. Within that, we acknowledge the complexities of both addressing the reasons for and identifying the risks associated with child poverty. It's a landscape which has changed significantly in recent years, particularly within work poverty that many families find themselves in. But one of the most important principles that cannot be overstated is that at no stage is the poverty the fault of the child. Our sole plan commits us to taking a preventative approach and identifying where early intervention is possible to avoid the negative impact of child poverty. Impacts which can affect the permanent life chances of our young people in education, in relationships, in mental and physical health, and the damage to our society as a whole. We have a vision of Falkirk as the place to be, and it will be our young people who create that future, and we must do all we can to nurture and protect them against this scourge of poverty. We've heard a lot about that this morning from all sides, and it's, although it's depressing, it's heartening to hear that so many are on the same page. The entire reason for the introduction of the family cap is to save money. There's no point in trying to hide that. The Westminster Government estimate that by 21-22 it would save more than £2 billion across the UK through its introduction, reducing the income, as Councillor Colley says, by £2,780 a year for families who have a third child under that system. The Equality and Human Rights Commission estimate, however, that the cumulative effects of austerity measures will mean an average drop in annual income of £5,150 for households with 3 or more children, and we see time and again that the punitive welfare policies of Westminster hit women and children hardest, be that on housing benefit, universal credit, or indeed in pension reform. It is depressing that it should be necessary for ourselves and the Scottish Government to spend so much time and effort trying to mitigate the effects of the unfair and ill-thought-out Westminster policy, but it is nonetheless essential that we do so, and this motion has some excellent measures for us to do that. We can do nothing here to change the rape clause, but as well as putting in measures to support women affected by the existence of this policy, we must send a message that we do not agree with Esther McVeigh's assessment that this policy, as she puts it, strikes the right balance between protecting the vulnerable and encouraging families who receive benefits to make the same financial decisions as those who support themselves solely through work. This is not only naive in that it ignores the fact that many families can find themselves suddenly out of work through no fault of their own, and some of those issues were brought up by Councillor Colley. But we need to have that safety net of maturity in our civilised society. But critically, it ignores all the evidence about the dangers to women in abusive relationships and the very real threats that they face when they leave their abusive partners. The Scottish Parliament recently passed a domestic abuse bill with unanimous support from all parties. Within it, as a society, we show that we've made great strides in understanding the impact of emotional and psychological abuse, as well as physical, and sometimes impossibly difficult situations which women have in facing and coming forward to leave their partner. We are doing all we can to address this in other areas, but the rape clause in requiring women to declare that they no longer live with the perpetrator of rape actually tries to push women into dangerous situations without the proper support that they require. We seem to have made so many strides forward in our understanding that rape often happens within relationships in complicated circumstances, and yet this attitude from Westminster takes us a million miles away from the direction we need to go. Filling in a form and talking to DWP advisor is not double support or any type of support, and while this policy exists, we must explore all avenues to support women and children in poverty, and follow our sole plan to make sure that the most vulnerable in our society are playing and shaping a full part in it. Please support the motion and ensure we take the steps necessary to do so.
Thanks for that. Anyone else? Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, Convener. I'm happy to support the motion as well, and Councillor Murtagh actually just referred to families through no fault of their own being in this similar situation. Now, it was nothing to do with rape. I was married at the time, but I found myself on benefits whilst pregnant with a third child, and I read this and I'm absolutely again aghast at the Tory policies that are being brought into place. And I personally, as I say, can relate to this. I stood there, I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember milk tokens, whilst I had 2 toddlers and was pregnant, and I can still remember the shame. And that was then, and it was bad enough then, and it's going to be 10 times worse now with the policies that are being put through by this government. I think, as I said, just to reiterate what I said, I think we should be hanging our heads in shame at some of the policies that are being brought into our society in this day and age.
Thanks for that. Councillor Limmer.
Thanks, Convener. Again, I fully support the sentiments contained in the motion. I think it's very worthwhile. Can I just clarify who it is we're actually writing? Who's actually going to be writing to the Secretary of State and the Cabinet Secretary? Because if this was heard at the full council, it would normally be the Chief Executive. I'm just wondering if that's changed with it coming here.
Well, I would assume we can get the Chief Executive to write to the various secretaries. Anyone else?
Just a small point, there's a mistake in the wording in number 2. The Scottish Government will commission, and it should be commission.
Sorry, excuse my spelling.
Okay, just for clarification.
Anyone else? If there's no amendment, Councillor Alexander?
Just to say that I'm very proud I am of my 2 colleagues in terms of the bringing together of this particular motion. I've learned a great deal and over the time of the discussions that we've had within the group, and that's to be welcomed. I also welcome the fact that there seems to be unanimity around the table on this particular issue, and I hope that that can be relayed to both the Westminster and other regimes. The I think again, for divergence in the manner in which we deal with welfare issues in Scotland compared to down south, and I would like to think this would begin the process of expanding the evolution of more powers, more benefits and more budgets to the Scottish Parliament. I think that we're beginning to see, as I say, a clear divergence in the manner in which welfare is addressed.
Anyone else? If not, and just before we close the meeting, because that's the end of the business, could I congratulate Councillor Paul on her motion and the sentiment behind it, because there can't be another time I've probably go back maybe as far as Margaret Thatcher, even anything as repugnant as making a woman who's been the victim of sexual abuse.
Good, that gives me the chance to repeat that. I appreciate that. I'm congratulating Councillor Colley on her motion and saying that in my time in the council, and I think I'm the longest serving councillor here, I've never known anything as repugnant as making a woman who's a victim of sexual abuse go forward to offices like you see somewhere behind us. So congratulations on your motion, and no problem with that. That then ends the business, so a final thanks and goodbye to Margaret. Thanks to you all for attending. Kate, thank you.